Welcome to Barnyard Language, honest talk about running farms and raising families. We are Caite and Arlene, an Iowa sheep farmer and an Ontario dairy farmer, with 6 kids, 2 husbands, and a whole lot of chaos between us.
While this is a podcast for farm families, sometimes our content isn't for the whole family. So kick off your boots, reheat your coffee, and join us for some Barnyard Language.
As hard as it is to believe, this is the final episode of Season 3. That means that we've been doing this thing for 3 years, which is wild. And I guess this is a really good time to thank all of you for listening and for following along with us and I guess hopefully finding that you are getting something out of this. I mean, Caite and I are enjoying it, so we keep doing it, but we know that there are at least a few people listening to us yammer on. So we want to thank you guys for doing that. And this is also going to be my chance to remind you that we would love it if you could go into your platform, wherever you're listening right now, and go give us a 5-star rating and give us a review if you're on Apple Podcasts. And I believe that Spotify even just recently added the option to leave reviews. So if you're on Spotify and want to leave us a review and say how fantastic we are, that would also be great because that helps other people find us. So please do that. And Caite, before we take our summer break, what is going on the farm?
We are done with second crop hay. We are almost done with combining wheat. My guinea pigs are really enjoying. I went out this morning. They always have a box of straw to play in. And this morning I scooped them up a huge box of fresh wheat straw, and they're having a delightfully good time with it. I got a message that my chickens have been harassing the house painting crew, so hopefully that will stop. Not my roosters, the hens have been following the painters around. The bull went...
Hopefully they will still continue to paint your house and don't leave because of chicken harassment.
Yeah. I mean, it's primed and it looks great, but it would look even better if it was painted. The bull got to go over to the neighbors the other day and has been very efficient
because he was wanted there, right? Like not
yes
not a
the
road.
bull was invited over to the neighbors, and is apparently doing his job very effectively and calmly and kindly, as is his general nature. He's a very chill dude. Other than that, it's the 3rd week of July, so we have back to school time in our sights in I think it's actually a month from today, but the
Okay, chill out, Caite. Your kids have an entire month of summer vacation. Don't fast track it. They don't need to buy their backpacks yet.
Oh, we already have backpacks, Arlene. I already bought school supplies.
Course.
Small town living, as I'm sure many of you have experienced, if you don't get school supplies when they're first out, there is a good chance that you will not get the school supplies on the list and will then have to do something more difficult than simply swinging through the school supply aisle during your grocery store trip.
Our local fair, we don't have county fairs, but like what we would consider to be our fair is the August long weekend. So basically the middle of summer for our kids, because they're, done at the end of June. They go back after Labor Day. So it's the first weekend of August. And my mother-in-law always says that once the fair is over, summer's basically over. And I always remind her that if that's how she feels, that she can look after my kids for the entire month of August, because as far as I'm concerned, once the fair is over, there's still a lot of summer left. Doesn't feel as much work now that they're older, but when they were little, I didn't really appreciate that comment quite as much.
Yeah, it's I think we're mostly at that point of the summer where you realize how few of the things you swore you were going to do more of this summer. At the end of last summer when you said, we never X, Y, and Z, and then at the beginning of this summer when you said, we should definitely X, Y, and Z, and now we're at the point where we're like, oh, we did like half of W, but none of X, Y, and Z. Like, we went to the pool for the first time 2 days ago, and it's the end of July. And for folks who don't live in a cold weather area, our pool closes Labor Day weekend, I think. I think it's after Monday of Labor Day weekend they close. simply because it gets too damn cold pretty quickly thereafter. And also, there's no lifeguards because they all have to go back to high school.
Yeah, they all went back to school.
Yep, yep. So we're at that point, but the house painting is going amazingly. They've primed the whole house bright white, which means you can probably see it from any of our listeners' houses. If you turn towards my house, you might be able to see it because it's real bright. Um, Other than that, same old, I think. Um, yeah, feels like nothing real exciting. How are things at your place, Arlene?
Things are good. We had a weekend away. So the boys stayed home, and the older two did some milking, which is semi new. We've been training them for a little while, but there's been a recent change in workforce around here, and so they're getting a more, and being summer, they're getting more regular hours on the barn. So they did some milking while we were away with one of our employees to kind of supervise. And so it was my husband's 25th university reunion. So it was his Aggie class. And so we got to go back to our university town, and we combined it with moving some of our daughter's big furniture into her rental house that she's going to be permanently, well, not permanently, but going to move into in September. But we thought if we were going 5 hours away anyway, we would pack the cattle trailer with furniture, as you do. So gave it a rough clean, and then threw some tarps down and put in a couch and a table and a mattress and box spring and some of those bigger items, and got those moved into her place. So she spent the weekend there at her house, and some of her roommates were actually also moving some things in. So she got to hang out with them, and we stayed with friends and got to do the reunion stuff. My husband's class had buried a time capsule. It was the 125th anniversary of the Ontario Agricultural College the year he graduated. So it was kind of a big year for the OAC at that point. And so his class had gotten permission to dig up a time capsule, or to bury a time capsule. So at their 25th reunion, the deal was they were going to open it up. So a hot tip, if you're going to bury liquids, sometimes they explode in 25 years. So there was a lot of interesting things in there. There was some of their clothing that they had had for their class, and there was their kind of mascots. Like they were the bulldogs, so they had a stuffed bulldog. There's lots of papers in there, their yearbook, all that kind of stuff. But they'd also put in 2 bottles of beer. So as you opened it, the stench of 25-year-old beer and some mold and yeah, all of that kind of came wafting out of it. So that was not the best, but the bottle of rye that they buried, I'm thinking because it has higher alcohol content and not much water, it was fine. So they were still able to drink some of the rye. And it just worked out because, I don't know, you wouldn't know this, Katie, but in our province, you can only buy liquor at the government owned stores. And currently their workers are on strike.
For whatever reason, I do actually know that, Arlene. I didn't know they were on strike, but
Yes, yeah. So they've been on strike for a few weeks. So we're coming up to the reunion, and you can't buy rye because all the stores are closed. The workers are on strike. So they had a 25-year-old bottle of Crown Royal that they had buried. And so that saved the day. There were a few rounds of shots out of this apparently very smooth rye because it had been aged perfectly underground in a what was a watertight container, but also had beer in it. So don't bury beer in a time capsule. It doesn't work out.
yeah, it seems like the Canadian freeze thaw cycle might be a little too much for most beer seals.
Yes, yeah, and it wasn't that deep, like it was, yeah. And other than that, there's another cow show this week. So my daughter's away with a few heifers, and a couple of our 4-H friends are working with her. And so they're away at a show. And so my involvement at this point was prepping some food and sending it along with them. So hopefully they are well fed as they look after their show string. And I think that's the main stuff that's been going on. We're trying to fit in some swimming and outdoor activities while, between chores while people are off. I have a 9-year-old who doesn't know how to ride a bike yet and is quite convinced he never needs to learn. And I am as determined that he should. So we're slowly negotiating that topic. So we'll see. We'll see who wins.
And did you have a happy birthday there, Arlene?
I did. Yes. Yeah. I turned 45. So, but the key is if you celebrate with people who are just a couple years older than you, then you feel super young. So my husband's class and he are just a couple years older than me. So it's like, wow, I am the young person in the crowd.
Yeah, that's a good point, really.
Yeah. Don't hang out with your kids. They make you feel old all the time.
Yeah, that is true.
So the next 5 weeks, because there's 5 Thursdays in August, you're going to be hearing repeat episodes. So if you've heard them before, you can listen again. If you haven't heard them before, that means that they are some of our I hate to say favorites, but they're some of the ones that we think that we really want people to make sure they listen to. So the next 5 weeks are going to be some of our top episodes from the last year or so. And you can also use this as an opportunity to catch up on other back episodes. Go back and listen, maybe not to the very first episode or two. Anyway, you make the choice. Figure out what you want to listen to, get caught up, and then we will see you back here in September. And we have some very exciting guests that I'm going to tell our Patreon members about, and not you guys. So, well, if you're on Patreon, you're going to hear it. If you're not on Patreon, you should come over and support us, and then you'll find out who we're talking to in September, because we have some big names coming up.
We have people that even my 2 small children were excited about, and they're not excited about much that's not Minecraft or unicorns. So it'll be well worth your $5 to know who it is.
Yes, yeah, there's your tip. Anyway, we will invite our last guest of season 3 to come on and chat with us, and then we will see all of you, or you will hear us, I guess. How does that work? Yeah, you'll hear us back in your ears in September. Have a great rest of your summer, everybody. Joining us from Ohio. Tristan, we always start each of our interviews with the exact same question, so we'll ask it to you too. And we always ask, what are you growing? So that can be crops and livestock and families and all kinds of other things. So Tristan, what are you growing?
Yeah, I love the question and love the broadness of it. So my wife and I are growing 4 young kiddos. We're growing a 6-year-old girl, a 4-year-old boy, a 4-year-old girl, and a 2-year-old girl. And so that takes up a lot of our time and capacity. Beyond that, on the farm, we have a small flock of laying hens. We're adding sheep at the end of July, and then we'll also be doing some meat chickens this fall as well. And in addition to that, we grow some crops. Lettuce, tomatoes, squash are going in the greenhouse right now. I've got some basil, got some jalapenos, some tomatillos, all sorts of different things. And then beyond that, we have a 450 fruit tree orchard. And so that's apple, pear, peach, plum, apricot, cherry, and nectarine. So those are the things we're growing currently.
That is a lot of different things. So we have had farms from an acre or maybe even smaller, some of our urban farmers, to, tens of thousands of acres. So how much physical space are you taking up with the land and those things that are growing?
Yeah, so it's an 87-acre farm, but about 50 of that is wooded. And so we're 35 acres of tillable land. Our orchard is about 4.5 acres. We've got another 20-acre field for animals and an outdoor garden. And then a 7-acre field that is actually just recreational for horses.
Sure. Yeah. It's always interesting to know how people, and, it depends on the land too, right? How productive each of our own farms can be based on geography and lots of other different qualities. So how many sheep? And I'm sure Katie's going to want to know what breed is coming to your farm, because she's the sheep farmer on the show.
Yeah, well, so I am brand new to farming. So Katie, you'll have to educate me on this, but we're going to add sheep, and the breed is called Katahdin, I believe is how you say it.
That's the same as her. So you're in good company.
That's what we raise.
Okay, great. Yeah, I've talked to a couple of other local farmers who run those sheep, and so we're excited to add them to the mix. They're going to run out in front of our chickens, be our lawnmowers, and then we'll also sell lamb in the farm store as we get that established. We're going to start with a small flock at first and work our way up. I was thinking I'd probably just start with 5 to 10 sheep and get some males, get some females, let them, do their thing and let it grow from there.
So you mentioned that you have a farm store. So is that seasonal, or are you hoping with the addition of meat birds and lamb offerings that you'd be open year round?
Yeah, so the farm store is actually being built as we speak. So we broke ground on that about a month ago. It will be finished late October, early November. And our hope is that it's a one-stop shop for at least the essentials. So beef, pork, chicken, produce, berries, honeys, maple syrups, soaps, all of those things. And if we don't produce it on our farm, we will source it in from other local farmers around us.
Tristan, we have Katahdins, and they're amazing. And I feel like you will be firmly in good hands with them. Or good hooves? Good hooves, I guess.
I'm looking forward to bringing them onto the farm. I like a good furry animal. The feathered animals are fun, but the furry ones are a little bit different. And we were thinking goats or sheep, and everybody I talked to is like, man, you got to go with sheep. Goats are really hard to contain and all of that. So
Yeah, I like sheep to start with because they're approachable, especially for little kids. I mean, a little kid can still get run over by a sheep, but it's less likely to end as badly as a little kid getting run over by a cow. So,
and that was our hope with our farm. We had talked about cattle, and with the way in which we're organized, such that we employ people with disabilities, and we're very family friendly in all of our volunteer activities, we decided, you know what, let's let the other farmers around us raise the cows. We'll do the smaller animals and then go from there.
I feel like there's certainly ways to do cattle that are more family friendly, but it tends to be a pretty one or two cow situation. I know folks who've milked one Jersey in or raised a couple Dexter cattle or something that are smaller and chiller. I certainly, Black Angus would not be the way I would go with that one.
I talked to a farmer 6 months ago. He said, I don't raise Black Angus because I don't like being in the same field with an animal that wants to kill me. So I think we'll hold off on the Black Angus for now.
That's a good life lesson there in one phrase. Yeah.
I think, we have some neighbors who raise award winning Black Angus and they have beautiful cattle. But the Angus we've had on our farm, I have never been in a pasture where I've been more worried about the cows than I was about the bull, which is not something I really enjoy in life. Um, so, oddly enough, your wife is from quite close to where my family started out, where my mom and her siblings grew up. So I'd really like to know how you got lucky enough to find a woman from Salina, of all places.
First of all, where are you from? Or where's your family from originally?
My mom grew up in Rockford.
Wow.
So like just up the road. I think I was
Yeah.
actually in Salina the last time I went to Ohio. So
Yeah. Well, you'll be happy to know my wife calls herself a city girl, being from the big city of Salina, which tells you a lot about Rockford. Rockford, even smaller. But yeah, so actually, I'm not from Ohio originally. I grew up in Texas and spent the first 25 years of life down there. I actually call myself a recovering attorney, and so was in law school down there before I transitioned into coaching college football. And that journey brought me to Tiffin University in the cornfields of Tiffin, Ohio. It was the first cornfields I'd ever seen in my life, driving from Austin, Texas to Tiffin, Ohio. And met my wife there at Tiffin University. She grew up in Salina and played softball throughout college, played down at Wright State in Dayton, and she was coaching softball at Tiffin University. So we met there, and within a very short amount of time, we were engaged. Within 8 months of me getting to Ohio, we were married within another 8 months and started having kiddos very quickly thereafter. I say we enjoyed a couple years of peace and quiet before, everything happened.
and so what is your ag background?
None. So I shouldn't say that. I guess I did grow up riding horses, if you consider that ag. My grandmother had 15 Arabians growing up, and so she did a lot of show horses, and so had that ag background. Also grew up on or hunting on a 2,000-acre ranch in Texas as well, and so had a lot of outdoor experience. And before all of that, my grandfather had a flock of chickens, had some cattle, and those types of things as well. But no real hands-on experience myself up until we launched this organization a year ago, other than we had an illegal backyard flock of chickens in Akron, Ohio, and so I figured the Akron police had bigger fish to fry than my three chickens. So we went for it, and we had that for a few years before we moved out toward the farm a little bit more. But that was about it, jumping into it. And I tell everybody at this point, our biggest obstacle to success is the farmer at this point. If I can keep from breaking down the tractor or whatever it might be, we're going to be in good shape.
So having had those other jobs that are seemingly unrelated to agriculture, are there parts of your other jobs as an attorney and a coach that you are bringing into farming? Are there things that you feel are helping you in being the farmer?
Yeah, I call it a career journey because my career path it doesn't look linear like a lot of folks does. But I started out as an attorney, became a college football coach, and then went into full-time ministry with a large nonprofit called Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And so much of what I'm bringing to the farming space that I think makes me a bit unique is oftentimes a higher level of organization than I see on a lot of farms. Not to beat up any farmers here. I love the farmers. Everybody's it's such a hardworking culture, but the legal portion of things really helped me to pay very close attention to details. And then beyond that, my last 7.5 years in nonprofit work, whenever I started working for Fellowship of Christian Athletes in 2016, it was a situation where you didn't get paid it unless you raised it. And so fundraising became my livelihood at that point. And so jumping into launching our own nonprofit, it being a farming nonprofit, we've put a really high emphasis on community engagement and networking and bringing the community into what we're doing, whether it be through volunteer opportunities, whether it be through donating or just, whatever it might be. And so I think we tend to be a little bit more community minded than a lot of farms as well. I think sometimes I see in the farming world the farmer's greatest strength, which is that individuality and push through it, and we're going to do things different than the world does it. That same strength is also sometimes a great weakness because they don't reach out for help and those types of things as well. So we're trying to do it in a way that we engage the community and bring the community out onto the farm on a regular basis to help us accomplish what we're trying to accomplish.
That is a really good point. I hear what you're saying about that farmer individuality, which is leads to resiliency in some ways, but like you said, not being willing
Mhm.
or able or thinking that asking for help is even an option can definitely be a weakness for some people. Katie, were you going to say something there?
I think too that as much of an introvert and a homebody as I am, for fundraising or nonprofit work or sales or whatever, there's a lot to be said for being well spoken and outgoing and normal enough to deal with other people, especially if you're looking for corporate donors or larger sales or things of that nature. That being too obviously individualistic can be a hindrance for a lot of things.
Yeah. And it doesn't come natural to me, again, a natural born introvert. It's challenging for me to get out there and connect with the community, but it has paid dividends incredibly as we've launched this farm within our first year to just get out there and meet people and introduce them to what we're trying to accomplish. And I'm sure a lot of the farmers you guys have on the podcast, one of their greatest obstacles is just community education, and helping people understand that they're there and what they're doing and what they're trying to accomplish is a big piece of the puzzle. If you never get out into the community, you're going to have a really hard time educating the community.
So you've talked a little bit about your nonprofit, which is one of the reasons that we have you on. And I know that story is combined with a story that's part of your family life. So I'm going to let you start however you want to tell us about both your daughter Scout and how the nonprofit was inspired and why you started it. So I'm going to just leave you to that story and we'll jump in as we have extra questions about it.
That sounds great. Yeah. So the nonprofit is called Farming with Friends. And really, the vision for this nonprofit started probably about 4 or 5 years ago. My oldest daughter, Scout, was born on March 8th, 2018. And we found out she had a disability in December of 2019. She actually had to have heart surgery on December 21st, 2019. And while she was under the knife having heart surgery, the geneticist called us with her diagnosis. And so my wife and I, in that moment, it was a double whammy, a big blow for us as parents, because so many questions start to go through your mind of how's the world going to treat my daughter? What does the future look like for my daughter? All of those types of things. And we really, kind of engaged in the grieving process, but came out the other side of December 2019 determined to serve Scout and people like her. We just really didn't know what that meant. And so at the time I was working for Fellowship of Christian Athletes. They are in the sports realm. And so we decided to launch FCA's first sports camps for people with disabilities in 21. And those took off really well. We ended up having over 100 campers registered in the first 45 days with our first camp, and we knew we were on to something. That we knew that there was a population that was desperately seeking inclusion and wanting to engage with the world around them. And so we did that for a couple of more years, and this farm vision continued to develop. Again, going back to that backyard flock of chickens that we had. I've got 4 kiddos, and all 4 of them will help me throughout the summer with the chickens, but I noticed that there was only one of them that was still out there with me in the Northeast Ohio winters, and that was Scout, my oldest daughter. And I really just felt like she sort of lit up in the agricultural environment. She could also dig in the garden for an hour, and that little girl, man, you just put some dirt on her hands, and she's a different person, and so I'm noticing all of this. I was also dealing with some personal health issues of my own. I was having migraines for about 9 years, and started to figure out that was inflammation related and related to my diet, which made me start to dig into the sort of industrial commercial food chain and all of the things that are going into our food, and started to become a little bit more passionate about just helping myself and my family eat cleaner food. And I still eat the garbage all the time. I mean, I'm not by any means standing on my pedestal here, but it was eye opening to me as someone with no background in agriculture. All of the things that are going on in the national, international food chain. So that was going on, and then on top of that, I had always felt like a dead body carrying around a brain in my profession up to that point. It was just, this body's just getting me to the next thing that I need to do with my brain, as opposed to actually engaging my body. And so really had this deep desire to use my hands in my work, and thought there'd be no better way than to use it, trying to serve a population of people who needs jobs, trying to create clean, healthy food for our community. And so these things are spinning around in my head. And it was December of 2022 when my career path with FCA didn't look like we thought it was going to look. And so I started to reach out to my network in Akron and meet with people. And I happened to be sharing with a good friend this farm vision. And he said, "This is going to sound crazy, man, but my wife and I bought a farm a year ago, and we're not farmers, but we really wanted to utilize this farm for good. We just really didn't know what to do with it." And so my wife, myself, his wife, and himself all got together in March of 23 and said, "Hey, let's launch this nonprofit called Farming with Friends that will employ people with disabilities on this farm and utilize this beautiful 87-acre farm for an incredible good for our community and for a population of people that otherwise don't have fulfilling employment opportunities." And so we launched summer 2023. I continued working for FCA through the end of August of 2023 and started full-time with Farming with Friends September 1st of 2023.
That is a lot in a very short amount of time, and adding 3 more kids to your family in the same amount of time. That is, you make a few years with a lot of life changes. Sounds like a kind of a shorter story than it really is. Are you willing to go into a little bit more detail about your daughter's diagnosis and what it means for her and for your family, kind of in the short and long term?
Yeah, absolutely. So Scout has something called Smith-McGinnis syndrome, which is fairly rare, but I think for the person who's maybe new to the disability community, a good comparison might be like a Down syndrome, right? So it's an intellectual disability. It comes with physical, intellectual, behavioral, and social challenges and delays. And for Scout and her particular diagnosis, there's a broad spectrum of how it impacts people. So some people are fairly high functioning. They can eventually live on their own. They can, hold down a job, all of those types of things. And then on the other end of the spectrum is folks that it even comes with some internal organ issues and challenges there, and potentially would never leave the home of their family and would struggle to hold down a job and all of that. And so she's only 6 right now, but we've been told that we'll be able to project that a little bit better as she gets toward the end of grade school. So sort of that maybe 10 to 12-year-old range. It seems right now that she's on the higher functioning end of things. She did go to kindergarten this year, and was probably 2.5 years behind her peers in her learning. And her diagnosis also comes with a flipped sleep schedule, and so her days are nights and her nights are days, which is incredibly challenging for her because she's up for 4 or 5 hours every night. And so we actually ended up having to pull her out of kindergarten at the spring break mark because we could just tell progressively throughout the year she was becoming more and more exhausted. That was impacting her behavior. It was impacting her digestion and those types of things. And so, yeah, that's the journey. It's one of those that you have to take a day at a time, and not worry too much about the future and what could be. And so in that way, it's been an incredible challenge, but an incredible blessing too, to just, enjoy Scout in the moment right now as she is, and, let what comes come in the future.
An inverted sleep schedule sounds like incredibly challenging for parents too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, here's the deal. I'm almost convinced that a lot of children have inverted sleep schedules because I've got 2 or 3 others that like to walk in my room at 2 o'clock in the morning as well. And yeah, tell me that their finger hurts or something. It's like, oh, buddy, okay, we can solve that problem at 8:30 in the morning. So yeah, it's challenging, and Scout being 6 years old, she still has her daily naps and stuff like that, and that was part of our thinking through the employment side of things is, as Scout ages out of school, how many employers are going to be okay with, hey, I've got to leave at 1 o'clock to go take a nap, That's not necessarily the typical story. And so, part of our dream here was to create an organization that really strives to structure itself in a way that fits the lives of its employees with disabilities.
I love that you're talking about employment too, and not just volunteer opportunities or, that the fact that people who have disabilities also you know, want to have jobs, and there are elements of their lives that are very expensive, and to be able to contribute to their families, whether they're living at home or living in group homes or whatever their living situation is, that people with disabilities also need to have income, and that is a challenge in so many ways. Podcasts are free to listen to, but they aren't free to create. Katie and I would appreciate your support as we work to build the Barnyard language community.
Patreon is an easy way for you to make a contribution that goes directly to making the show. As a member of our Patreon community, you get to watch the video version of our weekly updates, complete with questionable hairstyles and clutter. With 3 levels of support, you can choose a tier that works for you.
Keep the podcast going by becoming a patron today at patreon.com/barnyardlanguage.
For sure, and we strive to make it as close to a typical job opportunity as possible, and so many folks with disabilities just want just that, of course, if they need help, we're going to help them. But at the same time, we've got a couple of employees now, and, we're out there tilling the garden. We're out there, watering fruit trees when it's 95 and there's no wind, and all of that, and, my employee's out there just doing what anybody else would do. And he hops off the lawnmower or stops moving the chicken coop or whatever. And you can just tell he's beaming with pride. He's so excited to be out there doing what other people do, and to do hard labor and to push himself and to make mistakes and just, live in the world as much as he possibly can, similar to you and me.
I think, too, the other cool part about agriculture for folks with disabilities is that so much of it is about the outcome rather than the process, and that it doesn't matter how you get in a tractor, or it doesn't matter, when I was a kid, we had a neighbor who was deaf and didn't seem to make any difference at all for milking cows. That there's so much opportunity that is can be so flexible and can be so tailored. And for young folks, especially, to get that personalized, supported entry into employment and to have that, it makes it so much easier to get a job after you've had a job and you have references and you have, job skills and you've been introduced to more of how employment normally works with easier accommodations. And it's good for people to work. It's good for the brain.
Yeah. And to your point, farming's not necessarily a precision operation all the time, right? So if we, miss a weed with the mower or whatever, it's not the end of the world. We'll catch it next week, come back around, or, whatever it might be. And so, yeah, it is almost in ways the perfect job opportunity for a lot of our employees, because it does give them a great opportunity to get out there and try things, make mistakes, whatever it might be, and just continue to learn and grow as they go. Of course, as their supervisor and as others step onto the farm, you have to have a certain level of understanding of that and patience and all of those things. But at the end of the day, it does provide a great platform for them to jump out there and grow in their employability.
So I'm realizing too, I don't know how big Akron is, which is bad because I'm quite sure I've been through it at least once. What is living in a at least more rural area been like with your daughter's health needs? I think you guys are pretty close to Cleveland, right?
We are, yeah. So we were about 3 minutes from Akron Children's Hospital, almost downtown Akron, when she received her diagnosis. And we were in and out of the hospital at the time. It was so convenient to be right there. And now we have moved probably about 25 minutes outside of town. It's 25 minutes to downtown Akron, 25 minutes to downtown Cleveland. The Cleveland metro area is, I think, 1.8 million people, so it's not, it's not small. However, when you come out where we're at, it's a little more rural. We don't live on the 87-acre farm. We live on a 3-acre plot, just about 8 minutes away from that. And I tell you, for our children, for our mental health, for our emotional health, the move could not be better. I mean, they have space to roam and be. We lived in a place before where it just felt, people flying down our road at 45 miles an hour, and the road is only 20 feet from our home. We didn't feel real comfortable letting our kids out there. And so now they have not only our 3 acres, but an 87-acre farm to go take their shoes off, throw rocks in the creek, whatever it might be, just be kids. And we love that. It's just an awesome opportunity for us. And thankfully, Scout hasn't had any major medical issues or anything like that have needed tended to since we've moved out here. But with that said, we are, like I said, 25 minutes away from incredible healthcare, which is not necessarily common in the farming industry. So yeah, we're close to all of that, but at the same time, we get a little bit of the taste of the rural atmosphere.
So Tristan, we talk a lot to parents about the transition to parenthood, the becoming parents for the first time, and how challenging that can be both personally and to relationships. And I'm going to guess that with a child who had extra needs, whether they were present right from the beginning or, pretty early on, when you look back at that time of becoming parents, what are some things that stand out for you? Some particular challenges or some things that you were working through together?
Yeah. So I tell other new parents or folks who are becoming new parents that you'll never be able to read enough books. You'll never be able to have enough conversations to wrap your mind around what is about to happen to your life in so many good ways and so many challenging ways, right? But you're right. So Scout was born March 8th of 2018. And within the first 9 months or so, we knew that she was different. And so, in addition to all of the normal challenges of becoming a parent, of not really knowing, hey, my little baby, my newborn's making this random noise, is he or she okay? Those of us that are parents of multiple now are like, oh, they're just fine. Like, we don't even know where our fourth child is half the time. She's just doing her thing. But so on top of all of those little worries, we had the additional worry of, yeah, how is Scout going to progress? I think there's also a tendency, and this applies in the typical space as well, but we so badly want to sort of force growth upon our children. We wanted Scout to walk. We wanted her to talk. We wanted, and not only us, but others are setting goals for that and dates and all of that, and at some point we just had to again just stop and say, hey, Scout is who she is right now, and she'll get to that or she won't get to that, and that's okay. We're just gonna let her be who she is, because at the end of the day, we were driving ourselves crazy trying to force her into that, and we were driving her crazy. She's like, hey, I don't want to practice an hour a day trying to walk. I'm not there yet. And so I think for us, it's been a general process of letting go, right? And that's been so much of life. As you grow up and you're young, you've got this young energy where you just want to control the world, and change it all and figure it all out, and have the perfect family or whatever it might be. And as you go along, you slowly realize, like, man, I don't have as much control over that as I thought I did. And that's okay. If I'll just stop trying to wrap my mind and wrap my hands around all of this, I'll actually find myself in a much more peaceful spot as I move forward, and actually be able to create a better world around me, because I'm not in this constant wound up state of trying to control and change and all of that. So I think we're learning that. We're on the very front end of it with young kiddos. We're also headed down the path of homeschooling, which I know will be a whole other animal for us to digest and figure out, headed down that path. But I think, if anything, our parenting journey for the last 6 years has been a gradual process of just letting go.
So often those milestones, I think, as parents, like you said, you kind of almost treat them like a target, like an achievement. Like, okay, so if my kid crawled at however many months, like the book says they should, then I did that kind of thing. Like, you look at it, but they don't really need to be that way at all. And a lot of times it's more about, in the medical field anyway, picking up early on those things where our kids might need some more support, or maybe it's a sign that they need intervention or help, not that so that they can hit that target properly, but so that we're aware, and so that as first time parents or even fourth time parents, that if something is being missed, that then that we can, as parents and as medical professionals, they can give us the support that we need, rather than being like, okay, check that one off the list and now on to the next one, right? Like, where's our next ribbon for being the best parent?
For sure. Yeah, and to your point, we had so many medical professionals along the way that have just supported us, and whether it be medical professionals or even teachers that Scout has had, I mean, angels on earth for her and our family. It's just been incredible. Um, it takes a village, right? They say it, and you don't realize that as a young parent either, but man, does it take a village. Um, and part of the journey, too, I didn't mention, has been just figuring out, who is my kid, right? And Scout is, if you try and sit her down and get her to do a task, good luck, right? That little girl is chasing butterflies nonstop. But she is so incredibly social. Like, she wants to connect with other human beings, loves connecting with adults. And so for me, it's a matter of, hey, Scout, run in that lane, right? Don't try and be something you're not. Don't be something that you haven't been created to be. Go do what you do well, and help me empower you to do that. It has been a piece of this puzzle too. And of course, as we have our other three growing up, we're trying to identify those things in them too, and help them to kind of understand, hey, this is, you don't have to be a great chemist if chemistry doesn't come naturally to you. If history's your thing, go be a great historian, or whatever it might be. So
I think, as a kid who both, as the parent of a kid who both had early intervention and some, some difficulties along the way, dealing with professionals that you can really level with, and who are willing to level with you, and to be able to say things like, especially to my kids' teachers, that my kids will learn to read when they learn to read. They're 6 and 7. I care about them not being jerks. I care about them being able to get along with other humans. It'd be great if they could learn to read, but I'm not concerned about it at this point. But also having the supportive folks that, when you say, no, there really is an issue here, that they're prepared to to actually support you in that, and to, to listen to what you're saying about the kid that you see 24 hours a day at home, who they're seeing maybe, 20 minutes every 6 months or whatever.
Yeah, for sure, Katie. It's, and I've said this too, my daughter will likely not be a Harvard graduate or the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And if I'm being completely honest, I don't care. But what I do care is that she knows how to learn or love and respect people, and be a generally caring member of society. And thankfully, we've had teachers and others who have been in her life who have understood that, and not tried to, help her or force her get to the goal of reading by, Thanksgiving or whatever it might be. So yeah.
Yeah, and it looks like we lost Arlene, but I'm sure she'll be right back. Um, yeah, it can be so much too. For myself, letting go of how much perfectionism I had around, if my kid doesn't meet this milestone, it's because I am not doing a good enough job, not just that they're not meeting that milestone. And maybe that's totally fine. You know, it's unlikely that they're going to go forever without meeting things. Um, so, how has your transition into parenthood been, and how stressful has it been now that things have calmed down some? It sounds like that there was a couple years that was even more intense than it is now.
Yeah, for sure. I think between Scout's diagnosis in December of 2019 and having twins in May of 2020, and oh yeah, that thing called COVID that broke out in 2020. Well, there was about a 1 to 2 year period of our lives that my wife and I would say it's just a blur. Um, and now here we are, finding ourselves in what I've heard many other parents call the sweet spot. Right, we're not quite there, but we're getting there. Got a 6-year-old, two 4-year-olds, and a 2-year-old. Three of them are potty trained. We're slowly getting out of the stage where it's just constant inputs. Hey, I need my diaper changed. Hey, I need water. Hey, I need a snack. Hey, you can't sit down for 5 minutes. And so. Um, it's Gosh, I tell you, just within the last 6 months, it's been a great transition for us into sort of the next stage of not having newborns and having children that are a little bit more self-sufficient. Starting to interact with our children as young humans, young adults, and have conversations with them where they understand a little bit more and they're asking curious questions, and bringing them out to the farm to help us work, whether it be feed chickens or whatever. And for me, that's really exciting. I've told people, even in my previous role, that the younger they get, the more I tend to avoid them. I tend to like younger adults and adults. Not that I'm avoiding my own children; I love them all to death. But there's just something really sweet about being able to sit down with my 4-year-old girl and have a conversation of somewhat of depth, and she's understanding things and she's helping out around the house. I'm just really excited to continue down the path of developing a real connection and human relationship with my kiddos.
I know I feel like people probably think I'm some sort of sociopath when I say it, but newborn babies, like, I feel like a lot of folks get that sort of instinctive protective feeling towards them, but they're not very interesting. Like, I know I've told people that it's kind of like bringing home a screaming, pooping roommate who's basically a lump of bread dough, costs a lot of money, is really disruptive, and doesn't actually do anything cool, you know? And the older they get, the funnier they are. And it's, my kids are 6 and 7, so we're hard in that. They're either trying to murder each other or they're, having the time of their lives. But they're people now, and they are so much more interesting this way. Um, and I just totally lost my train of thought. I don't know how to do this when Arlene's not here. Um, So, are you and your wife both doing off-farm employment as well as the farming, or how does that look for you?
No, we're not. Yeah. So, as of 8.5 years ago, whenever I transitioned out of coaching, we had made a commitment to trying to keep my wife at home to help raise the children. And like I shared earlier, we're going to head down the path of homeschool. So she is not currently employed. She just stays at home with the children. And I am full time for farming with friends. So full time farming at this point. I think that's another piece of our puzzle and story that's a bit unique in that me having the fundraising background has allowed us to raise a significant amount of funding on the front end, which has allowed me to engage in farming full time as opposed to, a lot of folks having to have another part-time job or something like that. So I am full-time farming on the farm, probably, I mean, I'm on the farm every day to feed and water and move animals, but um, I'm in the office a couple days a week as well, or out in the community meeting with people um, as we move forward too. And I just hired a farm manager who will start July 1st. And so he'll take over a lot of the on-farm role, and I'll continue to pull up into that sort of development and sales and marketing side of things as we continue to develop as an organization.
And how many people are you serving currently in
Yeah,
your
so we currently have 5 total employees, including myself. 3 of those are typically abled, and then 2 have disabilities. And ultimately, our goal is to employ 10 to 15 people with disabilities on a regular basis throughout each year. And then for every 4 people with disabilities that we hire, we would like to hire one typically abled person. So you're talking about an entire staff eventually of 15 to 20 people helping us to run and operate this farm. A lot of them part-time. Part-time employment is generally seems to fit the disability space a little bit better than full-time employment. But at the same time, we're moving toward that goal, and we'll likely make a couple more hires before the end of this year.
it seems like too I volunteered for a number of years in a therapeutic recreation program. Um that it can be really challenging too because it seems like very few people have one well-defined disability, that a lot of folks have physical disabilities that have come with developmental issues, or genetic issues that have caused developmental and physical issues. And I'm wondering how you deal with so many different levels of ability and need, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of moving parts. I mean, anytime you let other humans participate in anything, there's already a lot of moving parts, but
Mm-hmm.
you're looking at even more than that.
Yeah, and I think to your point, that's the importance of approaching each individual as an individual, coming to understand what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, what they like, what they dislike, and all of those things. But the way that we have planned out the organization is that on the front end, we are hiring mostly high functioning people with disabilities that can wear multiple different hats on the farm. And so um, we started with our first employee in March, and he not only helps out on the farm with the chickens, with the orchard, with mowing, all of that, but he also helps me in the community with graphic design and connecting with people, with potential donors, and all of that as well. And so, early on, a big piece of the puzzle for us is hiring higher functioning people with disabilities that can wear a lot of different hats. But then, as we continue down the path, we can become a little bit more specialized in our employment as an organization. But we're just in a stage right now where we've got to kind of, hey, you got to be able to adapt and do a few different things. Now, with that said, we do have one employee who has ataxia, which is a disconnect between brain and body, where brain tells body to do something and body doesn't do it. And he's a bit more limited than our other employee, but he still helps us with weeding in the garden. He helps us put eggs in egg cartons, pressure washing the tractor, those types of things as well. And so, you just have to be creative too. At the end of the day, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done on a farm. And it's not all, precision work like we talked about earlier. There's a lot of different roles, and so just getting creative in how you do it, and then also providing support. That's been a piece of the puzzle for our employee who's a bit lower functioning. He's got an adult that comes alongside and helps as a volunteer as well, helps him navigate what we're doing. And so it just so happens that that's his mom that comes as well. But there are other organizations in our area, Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities and the local developmental disabilities boards, that will get involved in that way too and help us not only seek out candidates and vet them and interview them, but also will provide some level of job coaching on site as the employee needs it.
I think it's so cool to work with integrating everybody into the community, because I think it's hopefully getting better. But there's, historically there's been such a thing, especially in rural areas, of kids just staying home and farming and never really being out in a community or being put into programs where they were never really brought into the community. And I think it's certainly played into this sort of, disability is a superpower. Disabled people are always kind and happy at all times, because we can't handle the fact that people lose their cool because they're humans. And part of being a human is getting angry about stuff. Um, and I think it's just so great for the community to see, too, that everybody has something to offer and something to add, no matter what that might be.
For sure. And with a big piece of our community engagement pillar is intentionally creating collisions between typically able people and people with disabilities, and to your point, right? Come spend a few hours in my house and you'll figure out very quickly that people with disabilities aren't always, happy-go-lucky, as my daughter, throws something at you or whatever it might be. But that's a big piece of it for me is um, disability has become a lot more popular within the past 5 years or so, and there are a lot of people working toward inclusion, but there's still so many in the world who are more or less just afraid to jump into the space because they don't want to do the wrong thing, they don't want to say the wrong thing, whatever it might be, right? They're not intentionally excluding, but they're just a little bit afraid to jump into it. And so we wanted to create a space on the farm where it's sort of a non-threatening opportunity to work alongside of a person with a disability and see that, hey, Johnny's just Johnny. He might have a few different things, a few different supports that he needs, or he might process things a little bit differently than me, but he's just Johnny. And I can work alongside of him. We can get along. We can make this thing work. He can encourage me. I can encourage him. It's a two-way street. And so those are the type of opportunities we're trying to create on the farm so that the people that come onto the farm will take that mentality with them off of the farm wherever else they go.
I think, too, it's interesting, with children, because everybody they know is at very different levels of development generally, if they know babies and they know adults. And I think for kids, most people are pretty strange and different, so it seems like for most kids, their ability to accept people who are different is a lot higher. Also, because they haven't learned about all the things they're not supposed to ask or they're not supposed to notice. And sometimes as a parent, that can be absolutely mortifying. But, I prefer to hope that other people won't take my 6-year-old asking something rude in a bad way, because he's not trying to be mean about it. He just doesn't know that he's not supposed to ask yet. And I think um, we will let you speak for the parents of all people with disabilities, because clearly that is something that you're prepared to do. How do we not only teach our children but ourselves to get to understand people's abilities and needs better without being creepy and really offensive? I'm, you know,
I always start off the answer to this question by saying you're never going to please everyone. You know, we live in a society where so many people want to take offense at every little thing, and so, I think that paralyzes a lot of us and keeps us from stepping out there and just giving it a shot because we're just so afraid of offending or doing something wrong. And, I think from my perspective, such a big piece of it is just throwing yourself into the situation. Now, with that said, there are, certain um, ways of talking and language that you can use to assimilate to that community a little bit better. I like to use this analogy. If I were going to India to serve the Indian people, before I went over there, I would want to educate myself on their culture and customs. Otherwise, I'm going to go over there and step on some toes and, not serve them as well as I could. In a similar vein, if you know you're jumping into the realm of disability, there are some really, really basic educational, types of things that you can engage with to help you wrap your mind around what does it look like to engage well in this community. So familiarizing yourself with things like person first language, or what is a meltdown, what is a sensory room, what is, these types of things that, there's probably only a list of 15 to 20 things that if you would just read a definition of them, right, it already brings you way out ahead of most of the population in this space. But beyond that too, you find that the community of people with disabilities and family members of people with disabilities are, for the most part, incredibly graceful, incredibly open to helping someone that wants to jump into the community, right? In so many ways, this community is starving for um, normalcy, for whatever that word means. But and so they're excited about people that want to jump into it and get involved, and they're so often so willing to just say, "Hey, I'd love to help you figure out what this looks like. I'd love to, tell you, hey, you say person with a disability, not disabled person, or whatever. And so, for me, so much of it is just jump into it, just give it a shot, right? You're probably going to offend a few people on the front end. That's okay. They'll get over it or they won't, and that's okay. But at the end of the day, find those opportunities to get involved and jump into them. And then lastly, I'll wrap up with this too. We're not all necessarily called to go in and launch a farm that employs people with disabilities. Maybe people with disabilities it's just not a passion point for you. It's not your thing. It's not your wheelhouse. There's no need to feel bad about that, right? I think we've all got different passions, callings, and so just understanding that you don't have to force yourself into the community just because you feel bad about it or anything like that. Just follow your heart and go do the next right thing, the good thing, whatever that might be to you, and trust that somebody else might jump into the disability space if that's not your thing. So
That's an interesting point, and I feel like as humans, probably, if we remember to give people the benefit of the doubt that they are probably not trying to be rude, and that if they seem to still be trying to be rude and or being offended by everything, maybe that's just them and has nothing to do with the rest of us. Some people are just miserable people, and that's got nothing to do with anything about them except their commitment to being unhappy, which you can't really help them with.
yeah, and my good example of that in the disability space is using the terminology person with special needs or person with a disability, right? As a father of a person with a disability, I couldn't care less which one of those you use. I know that in using that language, you're trying to say the right thing, right? But there's going to be people out there that prefer one over the other, and they're probably going to let you know about it. And so that's it. It's just, again, you're not going to please everybody. And I'm sure in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, person with a disability will be offensive, and we'll have to shift to a new thing, and so on and so forth. So, at the end of the day, I'm with you. It's just like, hey, do your best and let the cards fall where they may, and know that some folks just aren't going to receive it well.
Yeah. I think to the importance of asking questions and not doing anything to a person with a disability that you would not do to someone else. I see a lot of things from folks with various physical differences about people touching them without asking. And I feel like we can categorically say that touching someone without asking is not an acceptable thing. And it really does not matter who that person is. You know, that unless they're like about to run in front of a moving vehicle, we just don't touch people. That's just not acceptable. And that, you know, I think people really do mean well, but we still don't touch people without asking. You know, ugh.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, and it's I guess the last thing on that for me is sometimes we just come into a relationship with a person with a disability with
Mhm.
certain assumptions. And I was in a small group with a group of people with disabilities about a year ago, and they were talking about just some challenges that they have and things that frustrate them. And one young lady spoke up and she said, so often when I tell people I have a disability, their first thing is, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And she's like, "Well, don't be so sorry for me. There's a lot of challenge in my life, but there's a lot of beauty in my life as a result of my disability." And so often we're so well-meaning in that, right? I don't think anybody says, "Oh, I'm so sorry," in a way that they're trying to be rude or offensive or anything. But I think sometimes we just don't realize that we automatically assume that their life is worse off because of their disability, and so it's just little things like that you learn over time, and for me, these are things that I would have had no idea about had I not actually been immersed in the world of disability.
I think, too, even if that person's life might have a lot of difficulties because of their disability, nobody wants to spend time with people that they know feel bad for them and that they know are just going, "Oh, it's so terrible. They're such a saint." Like, how reductive and horrible to feel like you can, then never lose your ever loving mind because you're supposed to be better by Arlene's back.
So Tristan, I know from looking at your website and engaging with you that you have three main focuses within Farming with Friends. So regenerative farming, employment of people with disabilities, which obviously we've talked a lot about, and community engagement, which are all really important, but they also seem daunting to do all three of those things well, plus to prioritize your own family and faith and all the things that are important to you. So I know it's still, you're still early in this phase of farming, but how at this point are you trying to balance both the needs of the nonprofit and the needs of yourself and your family at the same time?
Yeah, in full transparency, it's been incredibly difficult in these first 10 months of launching this nonprofit. I find myself torn really between three things, mostly one being family, which you know we launched this thing believing that it would be a greater step toward connection and freedom for our family, and so with that goal in mind, family is really really important for us. And then the second piece is the nonprofit piece, right, of developing out this organization, raising funds. Um, Managing a board or having a board manage me, however you look at that, hiring staff, all of those types of things. And then the added element that I haven't had before until starting this organization was the farm, right? And both of you know that that's
There's a bit of work there, yeah.
yeah, that'll take over your world very, very quickly. And so what we've watched over the last 10 months has been this ramping up, slowly all the way into this spring of Tristan being stretched incredibly thin. And so for us, we've just really, tried to prioritize. I know I'm going to sound crazy here, but as much as possible, 8 to 5 Monday through Friday on the farm, and then get out there on the weekends and do the bare minimum, and then I've got to trust, right? This is where faith comes in for me, that whatever I think I didn't get done or whatever, needs to be done in the organization or on the farm, like there's it either doesn't need to be done or it's going to find its way accomplished even though I'm not working till 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, which is incredibly difficult for me. I am just a performance addict in many ways. My um, numbing mechanism is workaholism, for the most part. And so to really just slow down and trust has been incredibly difficult. But that's also been a piece of my journey too in the nonprofit world. I would describe myself early on as the lone visionary, right? It was Tristan's going to put all of this on his shoulders and go get it done. And you figure out very quickly that's a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for a broken home. It's a recipe for, a heart attack or a stroke or whatever, comes your way. And it's also just miserable. It's lonely. It's not a fun place to be. And so somewhere along the way, and it was probably around the time that we got Scout's diagnosis, that I would say I shifted from lone visionary to shared vision and really just started inviting people into what I was trying to accomplish, and found out that they were incredibly excited about getting involved. I just had to speak up and invite them into it, and so that's been a big piece of the puzzle, is having, that third pillar of community engagement. We have groups of volunteers, sometimes upwards of 50 people out on the farm on one day to help us accomplish things, and that moves the needle forward incredibly well. Something that would have taken me a month to accomplish is done in an afternoon, which is really nice. And not only that, the financial piece, right? So we're not just relying on product sales. We've got hundreds of donors throughout the community that are pouring into what we're doing as well, which helps us not have to worry so much about ramping up product sales and allowing money to be the tail that wags the dog on our farm, which is the case for a lot of farmers right now. Farming's difficult financially. And so we've structured this, or try to do our best to structure this in a way that we can really prioritize what we feel is important, that being faith and family. And our approach is, if we can't do it in that way, then we're not going to do it, right? So either this whole thing's going to fall apart, or we're going to be able to accomplish it in that way. And it just so happens that so far things are going well. Talk to me in a few months, I might say, hey, we're closing the doors, who knows? But we're just, trying to really be intentional about doing first things first, putting first things first, leaving them there, and seeing what happens as a result of that. Now, with that said, it's been really, really challenging for my wife and I. The farming in general will put strain on a marriage. 4 small kiddos will, a child with a disability, all of those things. And so it's really important for us to continue to communicate and work through these things. We do a lot of stuff together. That was an important piece of the farm too, getting out onto the farm as a family together. We're going to speak at a conference together. It's not me going one way, her going another way. It's very much, we're trying to be intentional about keeping ourselves together as much as possible.
I know, Tristan, I guess you answered my question about whether you've always been a go big or go home kind of person, that you went from, one kid to finding out you had a child with a disability to 3 more children and a farm and self-employment and a nonprofit. Just why not? Just go for it. A few years ago, though, because I have long been a fairly similar sort of person, if you want it done right, do it yourself. A therapist pointed out to me how much obnoxious perfectionism is built into that, no one else can do it right. I don't trust you. I am the only one who can do it. And it's been like 3 or 4 years since she told me that, and I still find myself going, but I could do it better. And it's hard. But I think parenting and farming are both, as long as everybody's fed and watered and nobody's in immediate danger of immense physical harm, at some point you just have to be done with it. And, because your kids are never going to stop asking for snacks. The farm will never not need something else done. The one thing I can absolutely say about farming and parenting is that you will never be done if you let it just keep going.
Yeah, the to-do list never really wraps up. So having those intentional boundaries, I think, is really important. And I wonder, coming into it with a fresh set of eyes, it feels like to me that you have set up some really healthy boundaries that maybe a lot of multi-generational farmers don't have, because there's just this creeping expectation of, oh, well, if you work longer hours, or we always work 12-hour days in the spring and fall and maybe summer too, and oh well, we might as well just do that all year round. Because that to-do list is never finished, it can creep into a job and lifestyle, or whatever we want to call farming, where you never have any downtime, and that's not healthy for individuals. And if you are a farmer, you have to look after yourself too. And I know that's easy to say, and in times where the weather is good for that window of opportunity, but you have to also be willing to recognize the times when that 12-hour day or 14-hour day is not necessary, and going home and being with your family is the more important thing.
Yeah, and folks are going to think I'm crazy when I say this, but there is some incredible magic, incredible power, and whatever you want to call it, that whenever I actually just draw the boundary and say, hey, I'm going to stop, and take care of myself, take care of my family, that things become more simple, less stressful, and what gets done, or what needs to get done, gets done, right? And I can't explain it, I can't describe it, and it's so hard for me, again, to live in that mentality all the time. But I've seen it happen a million times over, and it's like, man, So if anybody has a hard time talking themselves into that, it's constantly me. But I've seen it happen, and we're trying to do it in that way.
I have to say too, as as the parent of two little ones, and especially with a lot of generational farmers, I think there's such a well, we never went on vacation as a family, so now I can't take my kids on vacation as a family. And the pride and joy that comes from breaking that cycle. And we went on vacation last week, I mean, all the way to St. Louis for 4 days. And Arlene, I was corrected, we are not starting second crop hay, we are 3 weeks into first crop hay still. So obviously there was plenty that should have been done, but we chose the farm. Our kids did not choose this life. They're little, and they deserve to still have that fun family time of St. Louis when it's 96 degrees out, rather than sitting in the house while daddy rakes hay, and it is hard, but our kids learn how to live their lives by watching what we do. And part of that is taking care of ourselves and taking care of each other, and not just work.
Are you looking for a blend of rural charm and personal growth? Tune in now to the Dairy Hour podcast with me, Val Levine. Join this dairy farming mom for insightful chats, empowering tips, and plenty of laughs. Nourish your mind and embrace the journey. Subscribe now to the Dairy Hour podcast, where every episode is a breath of fresh air and inspiration. Available wherever you get your podcasts. For more information, check out dairygalval.com.
So what are your favorite things about raising kids on the farm?
For me, it's just so even going back to your previous comments, I grew up in a home where my parents were split, and dad was on the road a lot, working, and so I didn't always get that quality time that I wish I would have had as a child. And although farming with friends seems outwardly focused and benevolent, at its core, it's incredibly selfish. And what I mean by that is that we launched this organization because we thought it would fit us and our family first and foremost. We thought that it would transform us. We thought that it would give us a better opportunity to connect with one another. And then growing out from that, it's great if it benefits the community as well. And so, for me, I mean, just yesterday, I'm on the farm. My wife pulls up. I've got immediately 2 girls in the tractor with me. We're going to pick up wood chips and dump them, and that's the middle of the day at 11 o'clock a.m., and it's just, for me, it's like, man, those are incredible opportunities and memories that those 2 little girls will remember forever, and so that was really our goal in this. And I just want my kids especially in a culture and society that seems to be moving toward, bigger, faster, stronger, more distraction, more television, more internet, more phones, man, I want to give them some level of opportunity to pull up out of that, to zoom out of it, and just see the world and all of its beauty, and to engage with the world, not only their fellow human beings, but nature as a part of it, right? Not as some disconnected entity that's battling it, or that's, so on and so forth. But I don't know. Freedom is the word that comes to mind. I want my kids to be more free than I was, or am, and to have a better opportunity at that. And for some reason, to me, nature and agriculture is really a big piece of that. Also, interacting with people with disabilities, right? You want to strip the pride and ego from a room, put a person with a disability in that room, watch the different way that people act. And so, I think for my kiddos too, they're growing up around not only their sister, but, I've got employees that are in and out of the house all the time, and they just know them as, to your point earlier, Katie, like they don't see different abilities. Everybody's differently able to them, and they're just interacting and loving and enjoying the human being in front of them, and so I think for me, it's just, I'm trying to create this sort of concoction, this recipe for their childhood that at least gives them some opportunity to not be sucked into the void that is so much of what humanity engages in.
I will say, my kids love a good multi-hour stint of Minecraft. Um, but that, as a not particularly religious person, that even better opportunity in agriculture for our kids to learn about what a fragile, miraculous place life and the earth really are. And that I think it can be so easy to take so many things for granted. And I think the more you show your kids, I don't want to say all the things that can go wrong, but how fragile it is good for them. Um, I heard my 6-year-old the other night told his sister, he goes, we're all going to die, but that's just part of being alive. Like, just out of nowhere. I have no idea where he got that one from, but it was, to hear him at least parroting that back that sounds like I just terrorize my kids at all times. But, you know,
No, but it's great. The types of things that you want. I mean, yeah, to your point, I guess, there's a lot of folks that would say you should protect your kids from that, but not from my perspective, right? Like, those are the types of things I want my 6-year-old saying. I want them, trying to wrap their mind around life at an earlier age, and trying to figure it out, and I don't know. I want my kids to have that depth, that you're describing there, as opposed to sort of just living life on the surface and getting to the end of it and saying, boy, I really wish I would have done things a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, there's a difference between protecting them from things that we don't think they need to know yet, or that we hope they don't have to experience. But the realities of life, we can't protect them from those things. And I mean, we talk on this podcast pretty frequently about the fact that death is one of those things, and on a farm there are unique examples of what that looks like, but that's also the reality. There's no other way out of this earth. And so there's no point in protecting them from that one in particular, because that's just the way it is. What are some of your biggest parenting struggles these days with 4 little ones? Start a list, right?
So, we haven't talked a bit about farming. You guys tricked me. It's all parenting.
Yeah. Yeah, we're doing both.
Yeah, no, I'm just kidding. This is great. You know, we have 4 very unique children that all need to be parented differently. We've got Scout, who, like I said, is a social butterfly. She's all over the place. Just, you can't get her to do a task. You tell her to put a pull up on, you're going to have to tell her 400 times before she actually puts that pull up on, and then we've got Tilly, who is more organized than I am at 4 years old. Like, she's on top of it. She's teaching everybody. And then Bing, who's like this really tender-hearted, caring little boy, but also has this. And I don't know if this is little boys in general. Katie, maybe you could tell me, but um, he won't listen. He does not listen. He doesn't listen to a thing you say. It's like, my goodness. I can say one thing to him till I'm blue in the face, and it's like it's in one ear and out the other. And then we have Dossie, our fourth, who is. We had three crazy kids, and we thought surely the fourth is going to be laid back, and it was like, no, she's crazier than all the others. We call her outside dog. Because she is just outside all the time at 2 years old, barefoot, running around doing her thing. And our biggest challenge, is just the day-to-day little, hey, getting them to accomplish this or that, and not losing our minds while we're telling them to do that, and there are many days where my wife and I look at one another and say, I'm not being a very good parent right now, but it's all I can do right now. It's they have pushed so many buttons throughout the day that it's just you're just doing your best, and so um, I think that's the main thing for us is just the little things. We're in a stage where our children are just trying to wrap their minds around life, and there's so much for them to take in, and we probably to a fault have really high expectations of them at times, and when it doesn't go exactly like we want it to, we struggle. And so I think from my perspective, it's just maybe more patience in the little things would be our biggest struggle.
I'm going to let you in on my top secret parenting tip. It's a two-parter. One, earplugs. Actually, 1A, no 6-year-old or any 4-year-old has ever listened to anything that anyone has ever told them ever, unless at one point you mumbled something about a snack, a toy, going somewhere they wanted to go, a pool, maybe airplanes. These are things that my children remember from before they were born. They knew about airplanes and swimming pools. Other than that, they will never listen to anything. The other, and I know this sounds ridiculous, when my kids are really not listening and I can feel my shoulders are like past my ears with frustration, I pretend to be a chicken. Sometimes I pretend to be a guinea pig. I like to mix it up. And I find that it relaxes me so much because you can't be wound that tight and pretend to be a chicken. And I know that just like when I yell for my dog over and over and over, and she's just like, there's that human making that noise again. Don't know what it means, don't care. Kids just stop hearing it the same way we stop hearing it when somebody nags us. And pretending to be a whatever just breaks that cycle. Or putting on music. Or dancing really badly in front of them. It turns out they can be embarrassed from a much younger age than I would have expected. But anything that breaks that cycle of us getting more and more upset, that because they're never going to listen. I mean, there's never going to be a time that they're going to go, oh, mom has yelled at me 58 times. I better listen on that 59th time because I bet she's serious now. If they ignored you 58 times, they're not going to start now. That's
For a while, we had a puppet bin, and I was always amazed. And I felt like I didn't think of it often enough. But when I would pull out one of those puppets and try talking through it, it was like I was on a kid's show. But the things that my kids would answer when the puppet asked, or would respond to when the puppet told them to do something, that if I said it, they wouldn't. And it was like, it's my hand and it's my voice. Why does this make any difference? But they would, talk to that puppet for some reason. I guess, the children's shows have it right on something.
I've noticed too that when my little boy is mad at me, if I pretend to be a mama guinea pig and he can pretend to be a baby guinea pig, he gets over it a lot faster because we can snuggle and communicate as guinea pigs and he doesn't have to forgive me. The boy child can still be mad, but baby guinea pig is happy. So Yeah.
Oh, why do we have to be so creative?
Why can't they just listen? I've just
Yeah, the first time, or maybe the second time.
by 3 at least. So we ask all of our guests, if you were going to dominate a category at the county fair, what would it be? And categories can be real or made up to ensure that you win.
Oh gosh, so I tell people farming is not my wheelhouse, right? It's something that I love and I enjoy. There are a million people in this world that can grow a better cow than I can, or grow a better tomato than I can. I think my sort of passion and wheelhouse at this point um, has become the fundraising piece and the sort of community engagement piece, And I know that sounds goofy, but I really think it's a missing piece for a lot of farms is the community engagement piece, and really how to do that. And so I would say if I were gonna win a ribbon, it might be in that sort of community engagement piece from a farming standpoint.
I think that's really important. And because, I mean, you can be the perfect farmer this season, but the weather or or some kind of event is gonna, is never gonna let you be top farmer every year with your tomato. But yeah, having people on your side, whether that be through funds or engagement or volunteer work or all of the other things, that's huge. And I think it's something that other farmers really should consider as a way to either expand their organizations or, like you said, even just the piece around education, consumer education, or letting people know what they're doing so that they know why they want to buy your product or support you, or those types of things are really important, because we know people have lots of choices. There's so many ways that you can get your food. So if you want them to buy or support what it is that you're doing, then you have to tell them why. So that's a really good one.
For sure. Yeah, and it's a capacity problem for most farmers, right? Like, hey, I'm already working a ton on the farm. How do I get in there?
Yeah,
And so
definitely.
I get it's tough to figure out that balance, but I do think it pays dividends incredibly if you spend a little bit of time doing it.
That's a good point. So we'll move into our cussing and discussing segment, which, as listeners know, is a place where you can vent or just talk about something that's important to you. So if you are a listener and want to submit yours, you can go to our SpeakPipe or to our email and submit a voice memo or an email that we can read out for you. So go to the show notes and find the links for those. Katie, what are your cussing and or discussing thoughts this week?
I'm cussing adulting. It's lame. My kids have so many good ideas for fun stuff that we should be doing, and having to be like, no, it's only Thursday. You have to go to daycare. I have to work. And I love my job. I do. I like my coworkers. I like my work. I like having money. But when my kids we should stay home and play Xbox and eat snacks and then maybe go fishing and then go to a movie and then go out for Chinese food. And I'm like,
that sounds way better.
that sounds awesome. Let's do that, And then my 7-year-old's like, when I grow up, I'm going to do whatever I want. And I'm like, of course you are, baby, because I can't ruin it for her now. That would be rude.
No, I mean, she's too early. We don't need to ruin her thoughts of the future yet. I mean, we'll protect her from that.
Of course you're going to eat ice cream every night and stay up as late as you want. Of course you are, baby. Yeah. I'm not digging it. Anyway, Tristan, what do you have to cuss and discuss today?
I like it. I'm going to piggyback off of yours, Katie, adulting in a different way. And you also made me think of this through your acting like a chicken reference. I think so often as we grow up, we feel as if we've got to become more serious. We feel as if we've got to act as if we've got this whole thing figured out, you know? And in doing that, we create a plethora of problems in our own lives and the lives of people around us. But if we'll just slow down and act like a chicken for 2 seconds, sometimes a lot of those problems will vanish. And so, I think for me, your chicken reference was just a reminder to stop taking myself so seriously and stop, trying to adult, so to speak, and just be a human and enjoy what's in front of you.
I think it's a good reminder, too, that if people do get too judgy about you acting like a chicken, assuming that you can still behave like a respectable human when needed, either they're not having enough fun or they're just not that interesting of people. And why would you saddle yourself with that? Like, just encourage them to be more fun, and if they still can't be more fun, then just be done with it.
To your point, I'm thinking now of making it a requirement that all of my friends have to first act like a chicken to be my friend, you know?
Yeah.
Wow, auditions. I like it.
Be a good screening tool right there. Be like, you want to be on the board of my nonprofit? How well can you act like a chicken? Can you do it?
It's one of the interview questions, yeah.
I mean, it'll tell you who will lean into stuff. Arlene, what do you have to cuss and discuss today?
So I'm going to discuss then, I'm going to continue on with this trend, and I'm going to require that when this episode comes out or shortly after, that since we've discussed this acting like a chicken a few times, I need to see a video evidence of Katie's routine. Because I've heard about it a couple of times, and I just, knowing you, I feel like you're an all-in kind of person, and that there are actions and there's a voice, and I just kind of feel like
You doubted that there would be actions and a voice?
Oh no, I did not. No, I did not doubt. I have an imagined version of what Katie as a chicken might be, but I feel like the reality might be even better. So I would like video, and I think it should probably be on our social media because the listeners also need to know. So that's my thought for today.
If you join our Patreon now, you'll be sure not to miss it.
Oh, that's a good strategy. Patreon only. There you go. So we want to thank you, Tristan, so much for joining us today. Remind people again, if they want to learn more about your nonprofit and your farm, where they should find you online.
Yeah, so they can visit www.farmingwithfriends.org or check us out on Facebook. We just have the page Farming with Friends, or on Instagram, it's @farming.with.friends.
Thank you so much. It was great meeting you and talking about your family and your farm.
Thanks for coming on, Tristan.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, ladies. This has been incredible. I've really enjoyed it. Love your personalities. Loved chatting with you, laughing with you, all of those things. So thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us on Barnyard Language. If you enjoy the show, please support us on Patreon with a donation.
Big thanks go out to our show editor, Krista Paffrath at the Rural Podcast Network.
Please rate and review the podcast wherever you listen, and follow the show so you never miss an episode.
If you want to connect with other farming families, join the private Barnyard Language Facebook group.
We are always in search of future guests for the podcast. If you or someone you know would like to chat with us, get in touch.